So he wants to give us a test case, and he wants us to consider gravity, right? So Newton's laws of universal gravitation, he tells us, is a mathematical law, but they are uncannily concise and precise. And they describe the force between objects as diverse as planets and bowling balls, yet this is all, quote, right? This is all it does. It merely describes what will happen, right?
Well, and since pretty much Einstein, we've been trying to find kind of that unified field theory that will bring in gravity into the single kind of proto particle or whatever it might be. There's always the desire of trying to get the gravitons and other stuff to come over to that single unification theory, and so far we haven't found it yet. So gravity is just theory, and it just seems like we're just describing the fairies pulling stuff down to the earth.
In fact, that's what he says. Newton's laws allow us to calculate, right, numerically describe the gravitational force between the objects.
To perceive it.
That's right. But his laws doesn't tell us what causes the force, right? Mm-hmm. It doesn't explain the object's behavior. It doesn't answer the question, why is the force thus?
Right. And we're asking this question not because, people say, the science doesn't want to say this, but it's what Hawkins and Krauss in our previous chapter said physics will do. Yeah. So we're wanting to take them at their word and say, okay, if physics describes this, then let's use this naturalistic way of finding the whys. We need to find the whys, and unfortunately, it doesn't seem like the whys are there for us.
Well, and so Mitch Stokes takes a step back and he says, now in light of the stupefying success afforded by this law, that is Newton's law, mm-hmm. it seems a bit petty to criticize it for a minor drawback.
Drawback that we're wanting
like it doesn't tell us anything, right? It just describes, right? In fact, the top scientists of Newton's day also was concerned. Leibniz, right? Gottfried Leibniz, especially thought, that Newton had degenerated the job of science. And in fact, he says this degeneration is one of the great changes made to philosophy during the scientific revolution. Scientists like Galileo and Newton believed that we should stop looking for unobservable explanations or causes, right, and just describe what's going on. Aristotle, the Aristotelian science, had such explanations and causes, right? And that was its ultimate goal, he tells us, right?
Yeah. So
mathematical descriptions were rare, but they weren't people doing math weren't general good philosophers. They weren't genuine philosophers. They were just mathematicians. They were technicians. And anybody can be a technician. It takes the philosopher, right, the natural scientist, to explain, the natural philosopher to explain, as Aristotle did, why these things were happening. Mm-hmm. Newton didn't do it, and he didn't know why they happened, and didn't try to pretend that he knew why.
For a while, he did. I mean, the Newton spheres are almost known by him almost occultically. He tried to preserve the spheres. Why spheres? Because God would want spheres for some odd reason. So he tried to keep it in there as long as possible, but unfortunately couldn't find it. And so with Aristotle, you had a why. You still had this kind of description, but you had more of a focus on, well, why is this the case? So fire goes up because it wants to go up. It's in its nature. So there's the why explanation that it tries to preserve. Once you hit kind of Galileo, especially once you get to Newton, kind of those things are out the window, and so
they're no longer part of science.
Yeah, you just want the description of
things. So Aristotle did give us a why, as you mentioned, in nature, right? He said unobservable natures, that is an internal essence in something, right? Something inside the physical object that caused them to move to their natural place of rest, namely, for instance, the center of the universe, or in his case, it was the earth.
The earth. The same thing. Right? Same thing. Synonymous.
So it's literally in the rock's nature to move toward the center of the cosmos, and this was what it did naturally. So it was natural for you pick up the rock, throw it up. Its nature, its essence, wanted to move toward the center of the universe, and so it acted out what it desired to do, right?
Well, and we kind of scoff and laugh at this now, but we have to realize that the nature of kind of the scientific revolution process is to have the kind of the agreed upon competing theory for the day. Then you have certain things that happen that you say that really shouldn't be happening in our theory. Then you have enough of them come together so that you have competing theories that come out, and you have a revolution, and so it follows this big circuit. So we laugh at Aristotelian explanations and models, but we did the same thing once we went from Newton to Einstein, as far as, well, we know Newton had it right, but it's only until you get into relativistic physics in college do you realize that what you were taught just works. But first of all, we don't know why, but also it doesn't work as well as what we want it to. So the descriptions kind of fell away with the revolution into Newtonian mechanics, and so we just want to describe it because that seems to be all that we
right. And so the same experience that we had with relativistic mechanics is the experience that these folks had with moving from Aristotle to Galileo and Newton. Right? He says, can you imagine then, based on people now with the Aristotelian model, where everything had its essence and it desired to do certain things. He says, can you imagine then the uproar Galileo caused when he suggested that natural philosophy should limit itself to what we can see? And that's not the invisible, whatever natural essences that things have, but only we describe what we can see, right? He says Galileo's success at mathematically describing the behavior of physical objects was difficult to overlook, and so we had to take him seriously. And, of course, Newton even more so, right? So Newton realized that his law of gravity, though, didn't specify what caused the attractive forces between two objects. It was an inscrutable, right, in physics as, in love. And so Newton didn't try. He says. Right. In fact, he famously said that he wasn't going to give us any hypothesis. Right?
He gave us the capital G for the gravitational constant of the universe. What more do you want from him?
Yeah. All right. And so this was considered a huge problem with Newton's physics. There seemed to be no mechanical cause, that is, no cause that depended on direct contact of pushes and pulls. It was just, this is how it works. I'm not going to give you a hypothesis of why it works, but this is how it works. Right. This is a description of what's going on.
So Newton didn't want to, so clearly Hume comes along and gives us the reason why, because we need to know why things happen.
Right, and Hume again says it's just a description. He says the reason why it happens is because we have we've gotten into the habit of seeing things work this way. Right? Causal connection is just our habit of of constantly conjoined things, and we expect this stuff to happen.
Right.
All right.